Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and you're listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. Today I'm going to talk to you about dealing with the fact that the relationship is over with the narcissist in your life. Whether you are the one who ended things or they are, there's very likely to be a period of grief that follows it, just like any other relationship. Relationships with pathologically narcissistic people are generally traumatic. They are mercurial, intense, and often abusive. There's usually a lot of emotional investment on the part of the non-narcissistic person, and many times a large amount of time has been invested in the relationship as well. For a large part of the relationship, there has commonly been a pattern of idealization and devaluation, where the non-narcissistic person is first put on a pedestal and then treated like garbage over and over and over again. There often seems to be no rational trigger for the fluctuation in behavior that people can figure out, and victims often feel that they are subjected to random behavioral changes that they are then blamed for causing. This roller coaster of unpredictability, coupled with the intensity of the extremes, can result in the formation of something called a trauma bond. Trauma bonding can make ending relationships very difficult, and there is a link to a video on the end screen of this video that you can listen to get a little more understanding about that. In some ways, the steps to deal with a narcissistic relationship ending are the same as those regarding non-narcissistic ones, but there are some things that make them different from other relationships. Trauma bonds are one of those things. Another is the amount of fantasy and cognitive dissonance involved in relationships with pathologically narcissistic people. Cognitive dissonance is when people hold two contradictory beliefs about something at the same time. For example, people who smoke want to smoke or even feel like they need to smoke, but they also know that smoking is bad for you. Usually, in order to reduce the psychological stress involved in this contradiction, they justify, minimize, or deny the conflicting information. So in the example of smoking, they would say to themselves, lots of people smoke and they don't have cancer, so it can't be that bad. Or they might say, I'm going to die anyway, so I might as well smoke if I want to. This is the same thing people often do in narcissistic relationships. They love the narcissistic person. They believe the narcissist is a good person who loves them back. They can also see that the narcissist is vindictive, selfish, controlling, and abusive. These two things cannot exist together in someone's mind. If someone is a good person that loves you, they do not abuse you and behave selfishly. Those two things contradict each other. So people come up with justifications, minimizations, and denials in order to reduce the contradiction. They make excuses for the narcissist's behavior or deny it because it's too psychologically stressful to hold both of these beliefs at the same time, and it's too painful or upsetting to change the beliefs in order to reflect reality. There are different types of cognitive dissonance, but the two most commonly seen in this situation are belief disconfirmation and effort justification. Effort justification in particular is very common here, which is where someone convinces themselves that the ends justify the means, basically. It will be worth putting up with the abuse when the narcissist finally understands the problem and changes, then we'll be happy forever. Or, yes, they're abusive now, but it won't last forever and it will be good again. It's not that big of a deal. It's worth it. Another example of this could be blaming yourself for the abuse. You might think to yourself, Bob is a good man. Bob loves me. Bob abuses me. A good man who loves his wife doesn't abuse his wife. Therefore, something must be wrong with me to make him behave in a way that makes no sense. Or you might say to yourself, mothers love their children. My mother abuses me. Therefore, something must be wrong with me to make her behave unnaturally. Cognitive dissonance is part of the reason there's so much fantasy involved in the relationship with narcissists. The focus of the relationship is always on something that either has not happened yet, like a time when the narcissist will not behave the way they usually do, or something that has not happened again, such as in the beginning of the relationship when the narcissist seems so perfect. There's a large amount of future faking involved in these relationships, and not just from the narcissist. They do engage in future faking, and they do tell people stories and manipulate them, but the victim is often future faking too. They focus on a hoped-for future with the narcissist that will be better than the present reality. When it doesn't come, they often readjust their expectations and just keep hoping. The cycles of idealization and devaluation can sometimes sort of help people to persuade themselves that the relationship is progressing when in actuality it isn't. It is only after years that people might realize nothing has changed. The narcissist is still the same person they always were. They might even be worse in some ways. When the victim's fantasy is finally punctured and the cognitive dissonance can no longer be reduced, the resulting trauma can be devastating. Regardless of how the fantasy thinking is exposed, this is often when the relationship finally ends. People simply cannot justify staying in it any longer without the fantasy. When the relationship is understood in reality, it's exposed for what it really is, and the victim realizes that they're never going to get what they want, and there's no point in continuing. This can be a gradual realization over time, or it can occur all at once. If it occurs all at once, there may be a period of shock that has to be processed before you can even think about grieving the relationship. As we've discussed, more than other types of relationships, there's often a very large difference between what the relationship with a narcissistic person seems like and what it actually is. The narcissist may end the relationship out of the blue, or you may discover something that changes the way you view the relationship and your ability to stay in it. This can all come as a huge shock to people, and if that has been your experience, you need to allow time to process the situation before you can begin actually dealing with the fact that the relationship has ended and the emotions that come with it. Sometimes I talk to people and it's only been a month and they're wondering when they're going to start feeling better. It's going to be longer than a month. You have to give yourself time to process what has happened, and then you have to give yourself time to grieve. Once the shock has worn off, and it can take a while, grief can set in. Some people may be embarrassed that they are upset that an abusive relationship is over, but look, there's no shame in that. It was real to you. You lost something very real to you, and it matters. Let yourself grieve and be honest about your feelings. It's okay that you're a caring human being, even if the other person isn't. Just remember that it takes time, and there's no tricks to get through it faster. It is what it is. It's a normal process, and it will work itself out. If you find yourself getting caught up in the what ifs and the could have, would have, should have, where that old conditioning tries to creep in, remember that in reality, all you've actually lost is your illusions. And painful though it may be, you're better off without them. Once you're able to see things in reality, you can actually engage in good self-care. And that's going to make all the difference. I hope this clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online and over the phone, so if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org and click the bookings tab to do that, or you can use the link that's available down there in the information section for this video. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you and have a wonderful day.